Hi, I'm Seth, and I'm an out boss.
Hello, Out Bosses! Rhodes Perry here, and welcome to this week's episode of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. And on this week's episode, we are welcoming Seth Vermilyea, joining us all the way from one of my favorite cities, Chicago, Illinois. Seth, welcome to the show. Are you ready to inspire fellow Out Bosses?
Yes, let's do it. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. So Seth is a tarot reader with a passion for serving the LGBTQ community. Since launching Coming Out Tarot, he helps his queer clients confirm where they are today and gives them the steps they need to achieve their goals. Tomorrow. He received his first tarot deck at 10, came out of the closet at 19, and officially came out of the tarot closet at 40 with Coming Out Tarot. He uses tarot to make sense of his clients' queer experiences in an increasingly challenging heteronormative world. Seth and his husband live in Chicago with their rescue ferrets. That's very cool. And I have to apologize. When I was reading your bio, there was a call coming in on my phone, and that's where I read my questions. I was like, oh my God, my flow. Anyway, that's an example. As an entrepreneur, you just got to go with the flow sometimes. So I'm super, super excited to be interviewing you and just to learn more about queer tarot. And why don't you kick us off and tell us a little bit more about your business? And, it's certainly unique, but in your own words, what makes it unique?
Sure. Once I finally took the leap and turned what I love to do into something that I could create a profession out of, I needed to understand better for myself what that truly meant and where I was headed. So once I started to put together all of those big life events or affirming events that you may not have even realized at the time were affirming, I saw that my trajectory had been not only the skill of tarot, but the interest of lifting up my queer community in the best way that I possibly can. I've done that no matter where I've went, and it's because I was inspired by those who have come before me, either very personally or just kind of in passing as I learn about the history of our queer community. I knew that I could merge these two things. And when I finally started doing that, I was able to really share with people that tarot was something I did, which is why I say I came out of the tarot closet at 40, because it took me until then to be able to somewhat comfortably even tell people that I was reading tarot, even though I was doing it for friends. I didn't really go around advertising it.
Yeah.
It took me a minute to get there. And once I realized that my strength was in serving the queer community, looking for those personal insights that people needed to change their life and create those actionable steps, because I'm also a project manager, all that stuff kind of landed in a queer space where someone could be honest with me in a way they might not be if they were sitting across from a heteronormative reader or space. So some of the readings that I get to do are so truly authentic in their queerness that I feel like I'm in the best place in my life when I get to do that.
I love what you're saying about that. This is a very woo-friendly space, though it is also a business podcast. And all of that to say is I often kick off every year going to get a reading done. And usually I'll go to like a spiritual medium who uses tarot as one of the tools just to kind of like map out, what the year will be like. It's so interesting because when I do this, I'm visiting my family in Central Florida, and this is at a place called Casadega. So it's kind of out in the middle of the woods. And you're totally right. When I go, I don't often talk about being a part of the LGBT family, the rainbow family, just because it's like, I want to see your skills. I want to see what you're going to come up with. And it's so interesting. It doesn't feel that for me, if I were to get a reading from you, right, like that would just be, it would kind of add another level and a level of comfort, certainly on my end, that I would get a great reading and not have to deal with potential bias, right? But anyway,
Yes.
So I digress a little bit. I like your model, and I love what you were talking about, where you finally felt ready to merge your passion, your interest in serving the LGBT community, and the skills that you have in tarot, and you figured out a way to kind of monetize all of these things to have a business. And I'm curious, before you came out of the tarot closet, right, were you already reading tarot cards for a general audience, or were you working? Like, what was your origin story to go from before coming out of the queer tarot closet to where you are now?
Yeah, so I have had a tarot deck since I was 10. I got one as a present, and I have been reading tarot since then. So I'll be 44 in May. So I've been reading tarot that long. It's never been far from me. It's always been something I've done for friends or family who happen to know, or if someone told someone else, if I had shared it somewhere, then I might have done a reading for them. But it was never something that I turned into a passion business until I was 40 and went, wait, there's more to this that I can do, and I can make this greater and potentially make it an income producing thing. And I wanted to do that. I just got lost in being excited about going from 10 to 40. In between there, I had so many different side roads where I was a professional stage manager for a while, and then I was a production manager. I've always been some sort of project manager. Stage management, production management, and project management are all the same thing. It's just different industry. And I have taken that with me into my tarot reading as well. So the same layer of bringing the queerness to the tarot reading and saying, this is a space where you can be as honest, transparent, as open as you want to be. And you don't have to hope or fear that someone may misgender you. And honestly, I've done that, and thankfully, it quickly corrected myself, and we've been able to go on. So, in the event of recognizing that we're all human, not every tarot reader is in that space, and I want to be there. So I'm doing my best to be there as authentically as I can. And I also bring that other layer of actionable advice, just being the project manager person that I am. I want to take you further, farther, faster. So when you come to get a reading with me, what I'm hoping is that I can take all my skill and all of my talent and all of my passion and say, between these three things, if you can meet me halfway and say, yes, this is who I am, this is where I want to be, and this is where I'm headed, but I'm stuck in this one spot, let's figure out how to get past that and through it together. And that's where my sweet spot is. So all those little things, all those divergences have brought me to being able to come out of the tarot closet.
So talk to me a little bit more about the business itself. Like for folks who are listening, who are passionate and may want to think about, okay, I want to serve the LGBT community. I want to use the skills that I have in something that I enjoy, like yoga or meditation or something that might be kind of similar but not the same as what you're doing. How do you go from that idea and that passion to then kind of building a business model where you can also survive and feed yourself and your family?
So you have to get past the fear and the judgment of taking a monetary exchange for the energy that you're putting out into the world. Many tarot readers just generally will believe that if I'm putting the energy of doing this spiritual work out into the world, there's some other balance that occurs and comes back. It's that that concept of karmic debt, right? You put something out there, something's going to come back. And then there's an even energy exchange. Well, energy comes in so many different forms for all of us. And we tend to put monikers on it, judgment calls like good or bad energy. Well, to me, energy is energy. And if I assign energy to a financial transaction, I put the energy in the money to have you spend your energy to do something for me, and that is an equal energy exchange based on an agreement we've made. So at some point, you have to get into a business mode of there will be a financial component to the work that I'm doing. And if there's a financial component, you need to get not only your financial house in order, but you need to have your product in order, because people aren't just going to come hand you money. You have to know how you are truly running your business. So you turn into your own CEO and you start to learn. So I started reading things on small business administration. I started reaching out to other small business owners and saying, well, how do you do your thing? And it was people who were either running tarot businesses or they were running other woo type things like yoga businesses. I got a coach based on a recommendation from a tarot reader who's been in business for 40 years. I reached out and said, who do I talk to? Where do I get started in order to make this thing the best it can be? Because I know it's not going to happen overnight, but I need a foundation. And so I not only did my own research, I got a coach and I started to build a network. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, you followed this kind of general approach, right, of what a lot of folks are interested in doing, whether you want to start a IT networking business, you're a lawyer, it's kind of find peers that are a little bit further ahead, or find a coach
Yeah.
who's been doing this for 40 years who can say, okay, here's how to design your business model, right? When you're talking about getting your products in order, can you give us some examples of some of the products that you make available to folks who want to work with you? And also, as you're thinking about those particular products, are you mostly an online business? Like, do you work with people around the world, or do you also have a space in Chicago where people can walk up and just meet with you and talk tarot and other fun woo topics?
Yeah, I am primarily an online business, so I am talking to people from around the world. I am also trying to figure out now what's the best way for me to get in front of people, because online has been wonderful, but I need to get in front of people. There's so many people online today that while I feel there's a niche for everybody, I feel like mine is actually in front of people. The more I get out in front of people and can do little events that are themed, like I did an event that was called Transcending the Binary. It was a health and wellness event for transgender individuals in between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and it was safe space. To do that event truly opened my eyes to what it was like to be back in front of people coming to me at a space that was set up to be a tarot space versus me creating that online type of space and really regulating the time based on what worked best for me. I'm working on what does it mean to really get in front of people, and then what does that mean in Chicago? Where are the queer spaces that I want to be in? What are the queer events that I want to be a part of? So I'm building those relationships today. The products that exist outside of me being at an event, which makes me and the reading the product, are like the focused ones right now are on queer relationships. Because what I'm discovering is that that's also a sweet spot for me. It's something I was always scared of in talking about or being a part of relationship conversations. And it's 90% of the questions I get. The questions, though, aren't always about romantic relationships. They're more often about familial relationships, and then professional and romantic are almost even. So I get a lot of questions about family relationships and then romantic relationships, which is reverse for what you might hear from a lot of readers that aren't identifying as queer. They're going to have a lot of romantic relationship questions, and they'll tell you straight out that's what they get. So the product for me right now is doing relationship readings and offering that in a way that is unique to our community because of the experience that I bring. So I'll have things on my blog, for example, about most recently about polyamorous relationships. While those aren't unique to the queer community, they've been a part of my life since I came out. And I am not in a polyamorous relationship, but I know so many people who are. And so it's a part of my world, and I know it and I recognize it. And I think that there's a level of comfort that comes with me being able to talk about primaries and extended relationships and what's the difference between open and primary, and being able to have different kind of awareness than they may go if they just go hoping to hear the right thing from another type of reader. We can get down to the nitty gritty.
Yeah, I mean, that's so valuable. I mean, it kind of goes back to the story that I shared with you in the beginning. It's just knowing that you are holding space that is non-judgmental. It's actually understanding because you're coming from within community to talk with people, to do an honest reading and to share insights about relationships that outside of the rainbow family can be judged, right? And that's when people just don't want to add that in their everyday life outside of rainbow space yet. You just have to
you actually
that.
helped me. You helped me unknowingly. So we have tarot readers will use spreads. Some of them don't, some of them do. I like to use spreads. And a spread is so many cards in a layout, and the card means certain things in different places. And I've been listening to your podcast for a while now, and I can't remember which episode this was, but there was one point where you were talking about coming out and what it means for people to come out and what the challenges might be and what surrounds coming out. And you use some very specific words, and it turned into a spread that I love to use for people, and they've actually responded to very well. So thank you.
Whoa, thank you. That's wow. I have a huge smile on my face. Thank you. Yeah. So What were the words? Share a little bit more. I'm curious
Yeah.
now.
You said, I wish I could remember the episode so you could go back and hear it, but you had shared that if someone's trying, or if they're in the stage of being ready to come out and it's time, we may not always be ready. So what do we need to be aware of during that stage and during the course of coming out?
Huh.
So the first card I have is, what's the environment that's surrounding someone? What do they need to be aware of that's surrounding them where they're choosing to come out? So if they're choosing to come out to a parent or a sibling, what's the environment around them and that parent? So we can get real specific and nail down into a specific relationship. But not only what's the environment, but let's take a look at what's at stake for them. What do they have to lose?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What are the challenges that can be in front of them that could cause them concern, pain, strife? What's striking fear? And then what are the benefits if they do it? So on the other side of what's at stake, what could potentially be the best outcome of coming out? And then to that, I added 2 other cards. These are the 3 things that you inspired me: environment, stake, and benefits. And then I added to that, who's the helper? Who's the person in your life that is going to help you through this transition? And I also added, who's the teacher? Because I think they're 2 different things. They may in fact be the same person, but they're 2 different things. Someone's going to help you through, and someone is going to teach you something about what you're going through so that you can carry that forward.
Oh my gosh. I love this.
So that's the spread.
I just had this vision of you taking this spread to LGBT community centers, working with young people, such a fun way of engaging on a pretty heavy topic, and really to evaluate, what's going on in your life right now and how can you do this in a way that, yes, you want to do it, and what are some important considerations, just so that you can be safer, if that's even possible, right? But that is so cool. Thank you for walking us through that, because I'm sure there's lots of people listening, and probably people thinking about those individual people who either were helpers or teachers. And I think even with teachers, how people react, that's a teaching moment as well, because there's plenty of different reactions, right? Wow. Okay. I'm thinking about all of this good stuff. You know what? I'm going to go to a quick sponsorship break, because there's more that I want to touch on with your business. And then we'll talk more about what brings you to the Rainbow community. Hey, Outbosses, Rhodes Perry here. As you all know, part of my passion for this podcast is to empower you and fellow LGBT entrepreneurs to cultivate a feeling of purpose and belonging in your business. To know that you can show up and be the most authentic version of yourself. Purpose, belonging, and workplace culture are concepts I take seriously in my own consulting business. In fact, I'm on a mission to empower leaders just like you and those on their way to joining us to cultivate cultures of belonging. In my upcoming book, Belonging at Work, I share some of my personal struggles of coming out as a trans guy in the workplace and how I leverage this experience as one of my business superpowers. Now, I'm on a mission to support you in taking simple actions that will make a world of difference for anyone who has ever felt as if they needed to hide important aspects of themselves on the job. When you commit to purchasing a special, limited edition copy of the book, a portion of your purchase will support expanding workplace opportunities for fellow transgender and non-binary people. An added bonus, your story about what it means to belong at work will be featured on the book's website to inspire others. You're ready to belong at work now. To learn more, visit rhodesonamazon.com or text 444-999 and type the word belong. Again, that's rhodesonamazon.com or text 444-999 and type belong. All right, so Seth, we're jumping back into the interview, and I just had 1 or 2 other business questions before we jump into what brings you to the Rainbow family. So this kind of business question is, as a tarot card reader, we've had a number of coaches on the show as well. One of the questions that I like to ask is, how do you measure success when you're working with someone, recognizing that it's not like, you have some kind of spreadsheet and you're seeing how people take your knowledge after they visit with you, but how do you know that you've made an impact after a reading?
So I have two things. One, and this is the more formal version, because of the project manager nature of who I am, I have add-ons to the readings that I do. So you can get a reading with me and the reading finishes and you're giving a bunch of personal insight and you go away and do whatever it is you need to do with the actionable advice you've received. The second layer of that is you can buy the next stage of that, which is a project plan. So I'll just give you a PDF of a project plan based on a certain time frame, because it's all subject to change. Once you leave my desk, it's all subject to change based on the action you take. But here's what we talked about that you could do in order to reach the outcome that you want to reach. And then the third level of that is I'll keep a live project plan in something like Smartsheets or Asana, whatever works best for us. And that project plan is then live. You can interact with it. And I add on 3 short follow-up readings throughout the year. So quarterly, we get together and do a check-in about where you are, what your next steps are. And you get an additional little mini reading to see, are you still on track? Do we need to shift? What else is happening? So I have that way. And then the other way is, especially if you're someone who comes in for that base reading and then I don't get follow-up time with you, I pass on a survey to you just to tell me, were the simple things right? Was I on time? Did you get what you were looking for? Can you give me any feedback on how the thing went? And then I'll follow up with you at some point and just check in and see how you're doing.
That just sparked another question for me. So it's kind of like client satisfaction survey. Is there something like for what you do, like a Yelp or Google like business review? You know what I mean? Like, or
Yeah.
is that something that when you get feedback from people that you've worked with who've, they're singing your praises, do you take some of that social proof and share it on your website, or any ideas on those questions?
Yeah, I do ask in the feedback form, I do ask for a release of, if they type any text, can I include that as a testimonial on my website? So if they release it, then I'll take parts of that or the whole thing, depending on how long it is. And I do put that on my website so people can see what other people are saying about me. There are some tarot readers who do end up on Yelp, but Yelp has been really weird about tarot readers. So I can't even get on there for some reason. Not every
Yelp
tarot
is not
reader is on Yelp.
it's not a woo-free space there.
I don't know what they're doing. I've tried for years.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know because my business doesn't have an address, Google doesn't have a place to put me.
Yeah.
So I don't know that people can even review me on Google. Now I do have a Facebook page that I put some stuff on regularly. I don't tend to live there like I do on Instagram or on Twitter. But there's a way for people to add in some reviews on there. And sometimes people will drop a review on Facebook.
Your approach to this kind of client engagement after an initial reading is really smart, because it's kind of encouraging people to take what they're learning by working with you to the next level if they want to. That option is there. You've built that in. And, for everyone, just giving them that opportunity of giving you feedback, which as entrepreneurs, right? It's sometimes hard to get feedback if you're not giving opportunities to constantly ask for it at different phases of the work that you're doing, depending what that is. This kind of like last business specific question is really for you, what has you lit up right now? Like, what is the one thing that, when you wake up every day, you're like, yes, I am so excited to be doing this thing. What is that?
Yes, there is one thing right now that I'm really scared about and I'm excited about it. As I discovered for myself that I had this fear of coming out of the tarot closet and that it was greater than my fear of coming out of the closet. I don't know if it was because I've come out of the closet for longer and we know that never stops. It just keeps going. So I'm just more rehearsed at it. Or do I truly have more fear about people judging what my sense of spirituality is and how I like to approach the world in a woo way? Versus knowing that there are already a lot of other people behind me and have got my back about being a part of the queer community and the rainbow family. I didn't know which one of those, I didn't know what the answer was. It's bothered me. So I started talking to other tarot readers, not just those who identify as being part of our rainbow family, but everybody that I knew. And they all said similarly, yes, I had trouble with coming out of the tarot closet and whatever their mode of divination was. So they all had some sort of a story to share. And so I'm excited that I'm going to start to collect those. And I've got some of those stories lined up. And I want to turn that into my own podcast where I get to talk about coming out of the tarot closet with
Yes.
other tarot readers in hopes that, and I want it to have a queer bent to it. My goal is to help bring up the next generation of queer tarot readers in a way that they're able to talk about not only who they are as their identity, but to include in that identity that I'm also a tarot reader and not have that be something separate or fearful.
Yes, I love that. I love that so much. And I hope that you do that very soon because it's certainly needed. You know, it will just starting conversations, just magic happens in that. And I think you'll see that very quickly. And like the example that you shared about the spread that you created, you never know the impact that you have by just hitting the record button and talking with peers in your community. So I'm so excited for you. I hope you do it. As you're getting started, I can give you lots of podcast resources. But the first one for sure is if you've not heard of the podcast movement, or just check out their stuff on Facebook. They have a big conference every year and they do little visits across the country in between the big conference. And I'm sure if they haven't been to Chicago, I'm sure they will be there soon. But please do it because I know that you'll have such a positive impact for so many folks. So with that, I'd like to shift and talk more about your what brings you to the Rainbow family. And, you know, just to kick off this part of the conversation, I was hoping you could identify a time when it was difficult for you to be 100% out in the workplace between the years of 10 and 44, somewhere in there. If you can draw on maybe one example and what was going on and how are you able to work around it? Because I think that will definitely help many listeners who still struggle with how to negotiate. How out can I be in my business, or how out can I be at work without losing my job or without losing clients?
It's hard to choose just one. So can I do a
Right.
mini and then one that I think is more impactful?
Yes.
So
Yes.
great. The mini is most recently as I'm on live doing tarot for people, because I do some donation readings that are really short and I do them live on Periscope on Fridays. There are so many online trolls that sometimes I'm not quite sure if the troll that's there is really a troll, because you can't always, without inflection and it's just typing, it's hard to tell sometimes. So when something comes across my screen that I believe may be something that's making it hard for me to do my job and is truly a homophobic moment or is coming at me in a way that I'm not feeling respected, then I invite them in and I say something like, hi, Don, or whoever whatever your name is. Thanks for coming in. What brought you into my broadcast today? And they'll either say what truly brought them in, which will tell me that they're probably a person who needs more help than I can give them, or they're someone who just didn't know how to express themselves and they do better the second time, and then we can have a better conversation. Or I just have to choose to let them go and not have them be a part of my broadcast. So being live with people is its own experience, I think, online. But in person, I work at a very large nonprofit during the day. And that experience is, you'd think it would be all warm and fuzzy. Most of the time it is. But there was a point where gay marriage hadn't passed yet. Domestic partnerships were about to be a thing in Illinois. And my office didn't know what it was doing about it. And I started getting with all of the other people who were identifying as gay and lesbian, queer, bisexual in my office. And there was enough of us that we started talking about what do we do and what should we be doing and how can we help this organization. And we started an employee resource group. And that employee resource group was meant to kind of dust the cobwebs out of our office and be a resource for our organization. And we stood up one day during October, National Coming Out Day, during LGBTQ History Month. And we did this presentation about kind of a quick timeline, Stonewall Forward-ish timeline. And also had some prizes for people if they could guess some of the answers, little quizzes. And we threw out candy and it was all kind of fun. Well, the next day, I got called into the HR office because there were people who had asked me to be fired for shoving this gay thing down their throat. My response to that was to the HR person, who was friendly, I thanked her for sharing it with me so that she wanted to make sure I was safe and that I felt comfortable. So I knew I had an ally in HR, so I was lucky. The next stage of that was, how do I take this to this group of employees and say, we have a challenge of homophobia in our own office. It's blatant now. And what are we going to do to turn the tide? So my response to things like that is much less fear and anger. It becomes activism. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it gets channeled into activism. So I try and find the route that I can take that is most friendly, most supportive in order to create the change that I wish to see in the world. Because I don't want to leave that as a legacy for someone else. I'm always going to clean up the mess before I walk out the door.
That is like kind of alchemy, that kind of magic of like, here's this kind of bad, whether it's someone online doing something offensive or kind of real time, just really misunderstanding, the role of an LGBT employee resource group is education, part of it, right? And sharing history, how that can be misconstrued by people who don't know what they don't know. And rather, like you said, rather than getting angry, which, in either of those moments, you have every right to have that emotion, really just trying to pause, reflect, and using that as an educational moment. That is a skill that, good on you for having those skills. And I wish more folks had them, right? But we're also emotional beings. And I think sometimes, especially like if you are in a workplace where you have the impression that things are warm and fuzzy, to have that kind of worldview challenge pretty quickly, in a moment where it's HR is knocking on your door, that could definitely knock a lot of folks off kilter, and you're able to stay grounded. And I think that your response and how you were able to work around that more kind of macro experience that you shared with your ERG is really powerful. And I really thank you for sharing that, because these stories are not always easy to kind of recall and bring up. And I'm just curious, like when you were able to kind of shine a light on the fact that there's homophobia in the office, at least within the ERG, were folks motivated to do more education, or was there a happy ending to that? Or did you just move on to greener pastures afterwards?
After the pitchforks came out and the torches were lit,
yes.
then I just had to lead. I had to focus this group of people to stop asking about who it was, because while I wasn't told who it was, there was enough intimation that I was able to understand who it was and who was surrounding it. So I knew that all I had was a bully, and I could confront that. So I took the opportunity to lead people through that emotional state in order to channel it into something greater. As soon as we got through all of that together, what we created was something that brought our entire C-suite to a kickoff for this group, because it hadn't officially kicked off. It was just kind of a thing, and we were trying to make it happen. Well, as soon as that happened, I went into high gear, and we got it together. And when the C-suite came to our kickoff to say this is a thing, because I had a sponsor, but I didn't know that everybody was going to come to our kickoff, and then they did, and I cried. Sitting in front of these people, being a leader of this thing that I thought was going to get me fired. And I thought now I am going to get an emotional state. That was going to get me fired. And I thought other people were not going to survive. And I had to do something. And the fact that these leaders, that I know not all of them were 100% behind me because of some of their religious convictions, they put that aside and said, our organization needs this, and I believe in what you're about to do. Yes. And that changed everything. It turned the tide. And today I tell people this story, and it's unfathomable to them that our culture existed in that way at one time.
Yeah. And you were the spark. The fact that it's different now is because you were brave enough to hold your ground and to express, why this employee resource group, your LGBT ERG, why it was so valuable to the organization then, and especially now, because people can see what you've accomplished since that initial, we're going to talk about Stonewall in our history. Yeah, thank you for what you're doing there and obviously in your own business. Okay, so that was really, really powerful. I really appreciate that. The other side of this conversation is that we do bring superpowers into our lives because we have some pretty unique experiences. And I think one of the kind of great equalizers for many of us in the rainbow family is that if we have had the privilege of coming out at least once, that's certainly something that is pretty unique to LGBT folks. And so for you, Seth, considering your lived experiences, do you view any of your lived experiences being within the rainbow family as a superpower in general? And if so, do you leverage those superpowers in your own business?
Yes. So I didn't I didn't have even a name for it until really I started moving forward with Coming Out Tarot, because this moment of starting the ERG years before that, being a part of an activist at the time, it's not really there anymore, type of community, because I'm from the Pacific Northwest as well. I'm from Oregon. I was part of a group of people that were doing their best to make change at a time that I lived there. And I've always been a part of the LGBTQ community, trying to make our community stronger in some way. And I didn't really realize it until I got to Coming Out Tarot and went, oh, I do have all these lived experiences that tells me, as I start to understand more and more about my identity every year, that is one of my greatest strengths. Because if I hadn't come out, I wouldn't have been able to move that ERG forward and lead other people through a time of incredible transition. If I hadn't come out, I wouldn't be able to be in a state of true and honest authenticity when I'm doing a reading for someone who's sitting across from me and saying, I'm not ready to get my top surgery yet, but I just came out to my sister and my family doesn't know what to do with me. And I'm just starting hormones, and they go through the swirl of everything. I wouldn't be able to take all of that in, share a moment, and then narrow down into what the thing is right now that I can help with, which is more often than not that the surgery is coming, not that generally the family isn't speaking to you, but it's that your sister isn't responding favorably to your coming out. How are we going to focus on that relationship? And if I hadn't come out, I wouldn't have the strength, the wherewithal, the understanding, or the ability to be able to sit across from you and say, I honestly and truly have the empathy for what you're going through, because our experiences aren't exactly the same, but they're pretty darn close. Yeah. Let's talk about what that is together and get through that together. And then you're going to be as strengthened as you can be when you walk away from my table to take the energy that I've had in my life because of coming out and draw on that and go do your thing.
Yes. What you're talking about is, with the coming out experience is knowing what authenticity means to you. And I feel like that's a word that we use over and over again. Last week's episode, we got really into the weeds on what that means. But I think, you had mentioned authenticity, you mentioned empathy, and also this kind of, there's a natural ability to lead, but also the drive to lead, like as you did in your workplace to try to make things better. These are themes that continue to pop up in the interviews that I have when asking guests like you this particular question. And it's really powerful to hear some of these responses. They're all super unique, just like yours, right? But some of these common threads that do link us together. And I think that maybe it starts with the coming out experience or just understanding how overwhelming that could feel, because it almost feels like the way that family in particular, or your community more largely, has seen you for X amount of years until this moment when you feel like, okay, I have to reintroduce myself to my community because they don't see me. They don't see the real me. And that is, oh my God, it's like taking 9 million different masks off. And to be able to hold space, if you're giving a reading with someone across from you, to just honestly be like, it's different. And, I feel this. I feel this deep in my soul because in a similar situation, I've been there. Just to kind of acknowledge that person in that moment, probably, I think it's life-saving, when you can really hear someone's story and see them. And it sounds like you do that pretty consistently in your readings. So I thank you for what you do. When you were talking about your podcast, I got really excited because you're thinking about, the next generation. For folks who are tuning in right now, considering some of the challenges of showing up authentically and what can be at risk, but then all of these amazing superpowers that we do have. What's one thing that you would want to encourage our guests to take away to just show up more authentically in their work, whether they're running their own business or they're working for someone else?
I think what's been best for me and what I would encourage anyone to do is to take truly, like what you said, what authenticity is to you. Take what authenticity is to you, but take it one day at a time, one moment at a time, because our experiences change from moment to moment and we learn from moment to moment. So I don't think that we have to be pigeonholed in who we're meant to be based on yesterday or even this morning. Because there are so many things that hit us through relationships, through the call we got about someone's illness, through the passing of someone that was unexpected, through the joy of someone giving birth and it was a surprise. You might have known they were pregnant, but it happened today instead of next week. All those things that change our lives in an instant. I think if we're open to how those can allow us to be the best version of ourselves, then I think we're all going to be okay.
Yes. I love that. I love that. Thank you. That's very powerful. Okay, Seth. So just two more questions really for you. And the first one is, it's clear that you are driven to serve the LGBT community. And I'm curious, outside of the work that you're doing with individuals through your tarot readings, are there other ways that you, and outside of your work as well, leading your LGBT employee resource group, are there other ways that you are giving back to communities more broadly in Chicago, or I don't know, maybe even nationally, that's really important just for you to stay in alignment with your values and your authenticity?
Yeah, that's actually part of why I chose the job that I go to on a daily basis, even though, so Coming Out Tarot is something that definitely has at least a 40-hour work week. It's just around the other job that's currently paying my mortgage.
Right.
So that job, I needed it to be something that gave me the same sense of fulfillment that Coming Out Tarot does. And I chose it because it is a nonprofit that focuses on health and human services. It is changing the landscape of Chicago in ways that I think it can do the most good. If we are able to change the state of graduation rates, improve education throughout the community that I live in, not only will we have people who are more educated, but we have that as a community that can go to college, get a job. So if you have the education that allows you to get a job, not to say that trades aren't important, and they are, and we're doing that work too, but there's so much knowledge work that goes on in our world today. If you don't have the education, I think you're doing yourself a disservice in what's available and what you can be a part of. So education gets you greater opportunities to have access to employment. If you've got a job, now you have the opportunity to have healthcare, live longer. You have access to caring for yourself in a way that people who don't have the financial resources to do so can. And eventually, what that does is then allow you the opportunity to give back to your community. So if you're financially stable, if you have housing, if you have healthcare, you're able to do more for others. It's kind of like putting the mask on yourself before putting the mask on someone else.
Totally.
So I think if those two things are in place, if people have got an education, if they've got an income, they've got healthcare, then our community is rising and lifting itself up, which is part of what I also try to do with Coming Out Tarot. If I can lift one relationship at a time, I'm lifting our queer community as a whole, because we're stronger through that network and that web. So same kind of concept.
Yes. Keep preaching. It's totally true. So where can we find you, Seth? Where can we learn about your tarot readings and stay plugged in, support you through a live broadcast? Let us know. Where can we find you online?
Sure. ComingOutTarot.com is my website, and all of my social media is at Coming Out Tarot, all one word. My live broadcasts are on Fridays at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, and that's on Twitter or Periscope if you're on the Periscope app, still at Coming Out Tarot. And I'm trying to discover, I also do a daily Coming Out Tarot, Coming Out forecast. And I used to do those on YouTube, but YouTube just changed how you can do your lives. If you don't have enough subscribers, you can't do lives anymore. So I'm going to start doing my lives probably on Instagram, which is between Twitter and Instagram. That's where I spend most of my time.
Okay. All of those places that you just mentioned, we're going to have in the show notes. So I want to make sure that listeners go over to our website, which is outentrepreneur.com. And for this particular episode, I believe it's episode 121, which I can't believe, but it is that episode. And that's where you can find Seth and all of the great places where you're doing these live broadcasts. And I definitely want to check out one. So you may see me there soon. And even today, right? This is a recording day, Friday.
Yeah.
So cool. So thank you so much, Seth. I really appreciate your time. And for all of the outbosses listening, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to connect with you and inspiring outbosses like Seth. So again, details from the conversation are going to be at outentrepreneur.com. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe to the podcast and definitely consider leaving a rating and review in iTunes. There are about 19 reviews, and the show is about 3 years old. So I know that there are thousands of listeners out there. So if the show is adding some value to your life, if it's helping you out, if it's inspired you, if it's inspired a tarot spread like with Seth, please let me know, because that's one of the few ways that I get feedback from listeners. And, if there's a specific question that you would love for me to ask guests as well, let me know. So that's the best way to find me. And for everyone tuning in, as always, keep showing up, keep being your authentic selves 100% of the time.